Timing matters. We're going to focus on sleep, schedules, and individual performance. But let's begin with this headline: why sleep deprivation is worse for you and your business more so than you think. So I really want to begin to first talk about what is sleep deprivation. So the best definition comes from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. And for an adult between the ages of 18 and 65, you should be getting at least 7 hours of sleep per night. Now, if you're like most people, you're going to say, well, wait a minute, I get by on 5 or 6. Yeah, but listen to your language. I get by on 5 or 6. So if you do that chronically over time, it's not good for your short-term health or your long-term health, nor is it good for your performance and productivity. However, it is true that there are certain people that can be highly productive without any impacts on their short-term or long-term health if they sleep 5-6 hours. That's not true for most individuals. So most adults, 7 to 9 hours is recommended. That less than 7 is moving into the definition of sleep deprivation. If it's less than 6, then it really drastically increases a lot of negative health effects. So let's look at the impacts of sleep deprivation. Poor logical reasoning, decreased alertness, slowed reaction time, impaired memory, faulty decision making, more errors and mistakes. Would you hire somebody like that? Would you retain somebody like that? Would you want to fly in an airplane with somebody like that? Would you want a dental hygienist in your mouth with something like that? No. So again, sleep is critically linked to performance, and schedules have an impact on both sleep and performance. Some of you may have heard the book by Malcolm Gladwell, The Outliers. And his central argument was this: that if you spend 10,000 hours engaged in a single activity, that you will become an expert. So if you think about the number of hours each worker in the United States spends at work, on average, full-time work is 2,080 hours. So 2,080 hours equals full-time work in the U.S. So this 10,000 hours is the equivalent of 5 years of work. So if you're doing 5 years of work focused on a single activity, you become quite an expert. So that was the main storyline of the book. However, if you go back to the original research, he only told part of the story. What he didn't say was this, and I'm going to quote this: "It comes after 10,000 hours of deliberate practice," I just said that, "but 12,500 hours of deliberate rest." Rest. So rest is not sleep. So rest is you're kind of laid back, you're doing something different, you're taking a break from that deliberate practice, and 30,000 hours of sleep. 30,000. So when you think about how can I become an expert, well, you need deliberate practice, 10,000 hours. You need deliberate, planned, intentional, scheduled rest, 12,500, and you need 30,000 hours of sleep. With all three of those are essential. So if you only have one and not the other two, you're not going to be as expert. If you only have two and not all three, you're not going to be as expert. So let's look at chronotypes. So what a chronotype is, when you're thinking about scheduling, is how are you wired? And you're wired this way genetically. So you may be more of a morning person. People may call them an owl. Or you may be more of an evening person. They call them a lark, if you will. So most people lie somewhere in the middle, but they lean more towards maybe morningness or eveningness. So this is essential. So because the way that we are biologically wired is at certain times of the day, certain physiological functions and psychological functions operate at a peak level. So let's take a look at this. Look at 6 a.m. So at 6 a.m., and let's say you rise and you wake up, melatonin secretion stops. What's melatonin? Melatonin is a hormone, and that hormone, what it begins to do is promote sleepiness. So that makes sense. If it's 6 in the morning, you wouldn't expect melatonin to increase, melatonin would decrease. And in the morning, bowel movements are more likely in the morning. That's assuming you have good GI health. You have the highest testosterone secretion in the morning. So not late night, activities, but early morning activities, that's when testosterone is at its highest. You have optimal alertness, getting close to noon. So if you have to have a procedure by a dentist or a procedure by a surgeon, or even if you have to go to court, make sure that you try to get something scheduled around 11 o'clock, because that way they're most alert. And then we go past noon. So around 1 or so, you're more coordinated from a physical point of view. Your fastest reaction time is also slightly after that, and your greatest cardiovascular activity. So if you notice, you're really at your physiological prime between that 12 and that 3 zone. Then we go to 6 p.m., highest blood pressure level. So that's important to keep in mind, and your highest body temperature. And then as soon as dusk begins, the sun begins to set, what happens? Melatonin increases to induce sleepiness, and then your bowel movements are suppressed, which makes sense because you wouldn't want your bowel movements increasing in terms of gut motility while you're sleeping. So your personal times might vary, but we all have these times. So sleep schedules and group performance are essential. So imagine this, you give a team 34 days to complete a project. When do they really get in gear? What would you say? Would you say after 5 days? Would you say right in the middle? Would you say 3/4 or towards the end? It's actually 17 days. So it's right in the middle. So that's when teams really begin to embrace the task and get busy. Imagine this. You give a team 11 days. When do they get going? And again, the answer is in the middle, 5.5 days. So it's something about groups. So think about a study group that you may be involved in, a work group. Why is it that the first couple of moments or months or weeks or years, however long it is it's slow to start? And some people get worried. But then usually you know now from science that at the halfway point, they're going to get in gear. So it's good to know that if you're a manager. It's also good to know that if you're a team lead or if you're a member of a team. This is a graphical depiction of that phenomenon. So you have your first meeting at A. Then B is completion. So if you notice there's a lull to the middle, and then you go up, and then there's a gain in performance, and then towards the end, there's another gain in performance. So this happens normally. So you want to make sure if you're leading a team, you're a member of a team, that you recognize this phenomenon before you freak out. So sleep, schedules, and performance are critical to the work that you do.